Hello everybody. Welcome to episode number 3 of our Vespa project. If you remember last time we discovered that we had spark, which is a good thing. We removed the carburetor. Now we're going to take the carburetor apart and clean it so that we can try starting it. So we've got a reasonably clean workspace here. We're going to get some glasses so I can see for this fine work. We'll start here with this cover for the float. When you're working on things like this, if you can get a hold of an owner's manual or a service manual, it's a big help. I've been studying my Haynes manual, which I kind of like those because they have a lot of photos and step-by-step procedures. So we'll take that off. Looks like we've got a little screen in there that's kind of a secondary filter after the sediment bowl gets the big stuff. So let's take a knife, see if we can get under that little corner. Get that free. Okay, set that there. As you can see, there's quite a lot of gunk in there that wouldn't have been very good to try to run it with. So let's see if we can get the top of this chamber off. So far, everything's been coming apart very well. If you run into resistance on any of this stuff, remember, patience and penetrating oil. Because some of this stuff, if you break it, it may be very, very hard to find. Okay, those are both loose. Now, these are going to probably be different length screws. So I'm just going to keep the carburetor in this relative position and put everything in order over here. So when I go to put it back together, I know where everything is. This one's missing a washer. Must be somebody's had this apart before and dropped one, which is not unusual, so we'll look for one of those. Okay. Nice and easy. And looks like we got a gasket that's trying to come out and won't. So let's back up a little bit and let's take this little piece off and see if that releases the rest of that gasket. Okay, what do we have under here? Okay, that looks like a jet cover. There's our carburetor jets, and there's the balance of that gasket. So now, there we go. And that gasket looks like it's going to need to be renewed for sure. And here we've got our float assembly. Of course, most motorcycles before fuel injection didn't have fuel pumps. They used to use a gravity system. And of course, this goes up and shuts off the flow to the carburetor. That's nice and free, but this is going to need cleaning, so we'll see if we can take that apart further. Let's take a look at those jets. They're different sizes, so we shouldn't mix them up. This is most likely the pilot jet for the low speed running and starting. And I can see light through that hole, but that one is plugged, so that would not have started. And get a bigger screwdriver, and we'll take this jet out. Nice thing about these brass jets, they seldom freeze in place. Sometimes it takes a little force, but usually they come out pretty nicely. And see that? You can see a little light through those holes, but once again, the main hole on this main jet is plugged solid. So we definitely are going to need to clean this. In the bottom of the float bowl, we've got a nice accumulation of mud. I don't know if you can see that, but that'll be part of our cleaning process. And we have a little light here. Maybe that'll help on some of these. Oh yeah, that's going to need some serious cleaning. Okay. Now, these two, this would be the idle adjustment for the throttle, and this would be the pilot jet. Either adjust the gas or the air at low and idle speeds. We're going to take those out so we can clean the carburetor body well and clean these. But on these, even though we're going to have to tune the carburetor afterwards, you're going to want to be able to put them back in the same relative position for a starting point. So before we take those out, we're going to make a little diagram, a little crude diagram, doesn't have to be fancy. And I'm going to want to show this roughly and where the relative position of this screw slot is. Now we're going to lightly seat it. We're going to turn it and we're going to count the turns. Okay, we're going to go, well, that one's very stiff. Half a turn, one turn, 1.5, and that's seated. Now don't use a lot of force. You don't want to distort the end of this or the carburetor body. You just want to feel it stop. So it's almost in the same relative position. So we're going to say that that one is out 1 1/2 turns. When we go to put it back together, we're going to lightly seat it again and back it back to that same relative position. So now that we know where it goes, we can take it right out of the way. And that's a little bit dirty, but mostly we want to get this carb body clean. Okay, the pilot jet, same thing. Done a little sketch. Shows me that this ended up with the screw slot kind of facing toward this 90-degree corner right here. And let's see how far out it is. We're going to go in 1/2. And that's about it. So that one ends up in this position, and that's about 1/4 of a turn, so we're going to say out 3/4 of a turn. Okay, those are notes we'll save when we go to put this back together. Let's get that right out of there. Will be cleaned up along with the rest. All we have left to disassemble is the throttle slide and the choke. And these are quite a neat design. It's just a flat slide that as you pull the throttle opens up. It lets it flow more fuel and air mixture. And it looks like it's held on by 2 screws on the end. Now that pressure tells me there's a pretty strong spring in there, so we'll have to be careful and hold this down as we're taking it apart so it doesn't shoot across the room or hit us in the head. Get that screw started. That screw. Yeah, I can feel the pressure already, so we'll hang right onto that. Okay, I'll set that over here. Lots of threads, nice fine thread. Okay, now we're going to let that out nice and easy. And there you can see that spring. And there's the slide. Okay, now if we set that there carefully, maybe we can keep that spring right in place until we're ready to put it back together. Okay, as you see, that opens that up, and that just leaves us with this choke mechanism. This looks like it's held on by 1 screw. We'll keep a finger over it just in case that's spring loaded as well. And there we have that with that little piston that goes in and either blocks off some of the air to richen the mixture, or it might open up a passage to let more fuel in. Either way, it gives you a richer mixture for starting. Okay, so now we've got a pretty well stripped carburetor body. Just take a look and make sure there's nothing we missed. We're going to use a solution to clean all the parts in, get all the gunk out of them, get them nice and clean. Before you soak anything in a solution like this, or whatever you use for carburetor cleaner, you want to make sure there's no gaskets, no rubber parts, or anything else left in there, because this will eat them up. So that'll be good. That can be soaked. These can be soaked. This looks like we've got a rubber gasket here that the throttle arm slides through. We may or may not be renewing that. So I think we'll just clean that up by hand and not soak that. Same thing with the choke. This is going to need to be dunked, so let's see if we can get that float out. Now, you're going to be very careful doing this. We'll give it a little penetrating oil around that pin. If this doesn't want to come, we're going to set it down and add penetrating oil for as many times as it takes, because if you break one of these ears off, this piece is junk. But everything else has come apart pretty well. That's brass, so let's give it a try. We'll take a nice piece of soft pine, maybe something to shim it up with. And somewhere I had a nail. And I've kind of ground the end just a little to make a tiny punch, because I don't have a punch that small. Try to get this where you can see it. We'll get right on the end of that pin and give it a very light tap. And it's actually moving, so that's great. If it didn't, we'd turn it over, tap the other way a few times. If it didn't want to move at all, we have to be patient and wait until it's ready to. So, if I can find my pliers. Well, we'll have to grab another pair. Thought I had a pair out. Okay, let's see if we can pull that right out. And there it comes. Little brass pin. Set that there. Plastic float. Sometimes these are cork, sometimes they're metal. This one's plastic, and there goes the float needle. We shake it and don't hear any gas in it, which is a good sign. That means it's probably not been leaking. And here's the little float needle, rubber tipped. We'll treat that with a little Armor All to soften it up. Hopefully that'll still seal and we won't need to buy one of those. So now we end up with this assembly. You can see all the good debris in there, and where the float needle goes in to seal the gas off. So the only thing left, we'll pry this gasket off here before we soak that part. Now, I'm not going to bore you with waiting 20 minutes to soak the parts. We'll do that and have everything clean and ready for next time. The only thing I'll say is when you are cleaning carburetor parts, you want to, when you're done soaking in the solution, you want to blow them out with compressed air. You're going to be tempted to take a fine wire or something and clean these small holes, or a torch cleaner. Don't do it. It takes nothing to enlarge these, and then it'll never run right. And also, if you have a home compressor and you're using compressed air, obviously wear eye protection, but also hold on tight, because if you give these a blast of compressed air and they go flying across the room, you're going to be looking for them for a long time. So that's where we're at. We're going to get this cleaned up. We've already got a new set of gaskets on the way, and hopefully next time we'll get this all back together and get it back on the bike so that we can be one step closer to getting this started, because I'm getting anxious to hear it run. So any comments you'd like to give us, any help or advice, or tell us what you like or don't like. If you like things, give us a thumbs up. Maybe consider subscribing. And that's all for today. So take care, God bless, and happy trails.